back to back, this is what I do all day. But it beats got it sounding like a vortex. Flex.
Hey guys, welcome to the Chile Manga Show. I hope you are great. What happened was I wanted to dress up like I was from like the 1950s, 1940s or something. But I realized because I'm a broke bitch, I don't have attire for these dreams. I dream bigger than what my budget has. I ain't got none. I was trying to get like a pearl necklace and stuff, and then I was like, let me just do this video. It's never gonna be done. Okay, so I'm gonna name this under my vlogmas because I'm releasing during Christmas season. However, it is its own series, so it will carry on after vlogmas, just so that you're aware what's happening. This is called Was Rotten Tomato Right? What I'm gonna do with this series is look at their ratings, take 2 or 3 movies from each rating category and see if they were right, because I feel like somebody gotta, and probably someone has. I don't know. I didn't look for it on YouTube because I didn't want to get like discouraged, or I didn't want to accidentally copy anyone. This is me doing my own thing, my own ratings. Rotten Tomato is a website where a bunch of critics, I think it's 200 critics, I don't know, I can't remember, they all come together and they decide whether a movie is good or bad, and then they rate it and they give you like a very short summary of like what their rating is, right? Now, the reason I started this series is literally because I don't respect Rotten Tomato. I personally think that, you know what, we all have our own opinions, and I guess the reason Rotten Tomato has so many different critics working on like finding a rating for things is just so that it seems unbiased. However, it's kind of easy to see a bias, you know, when it comes to the things they like and they don't like. This is not to say all their ratings are wrong or undeserving or anything like that. However, I do feel a lot of the movies with lower ratings, sometimes I feel there's a specific group of movies that fall under there. And then sometimes when they tell you why they don't like a specific movie, it's not for the reason on why it shouldn't be liked. And an example of this would be Tyler Perry, right? Hate the dude, can't stand him. However, I feel like Rotten Tomato gives his movies a particular rating for a different reason than what it is. The problem with Tyler Perry's movies is his depiction of black women and mostly the whole colorism situation, right? But with Rotten Tomato, they use this idea of unrelatability and stuff like that for why it's not a good film. It's not our fault if black people, you know, live a particular type of life that white people can't relate to. Doesn't mean something's bad. It just means that white people should perhaps, you know, open their like subject matters up a bit. The same thing can be said for Boondocks, right? Boondocks has a 54% rating on Rotten Tomato, which is the most insulting thing I've ever seen in my life. And they literally said it's because some people won't understand the satire behind it. However, Birth of a Nation has, I think, a 93% rating. And that doesn't make sense to me because Birth of a Nation is racist. And they say even with their problematic subject, it's still open a vast whatever in cinema. I'm not saying that it didn't open stuff in cinema. I'm saying this movie is racist as fuck and should have a 3% rating. I'm sorry, I don't care how great it was cinematically. If it is insulting a group of people and literally doing blackface, you cannot rate it at a 93%. What, minus 7% for racism? Are you mad? Now, I also understand that Rotten Tomato is about filmic and not about social issues. However, I think that film and social issues are very closely linked. For example, the reason Get Out was as good as it was because of the social issues behind it. The same way I think that Us was the same thing. The same way Moonlight is the same thing. And these all have great ratings behind them. But these also have social issues behind them. Those social issues drove everything else about the film. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm sorry it's a long introduction. It's just because it's the first one of the series. Today we're going to be looking at Rotten Tomatoes 100% ratings, okay? Imagine making an art project that is literally perfect. The idea seems ridiculous, no matter what kind of creative field you're in, no matter what. There are quite a few films under this category, but the ones I was able to find are quite old films. And I personally wanted to watch something from 2016, but I couldn't find the subtitled version of it. It's called The Age of Shadows, and it looks so freaking cool. It's got that hot guy from Squid Games. The movies we're going to be looking at today are Rebecca by Alfred Hitchcock, an English movie, and 12 Angry Men, which is an American movie it was directed by Sidney, I don't know if you say Lumet or Lumet. So Alfred Hitchcock is like a dope ass filmmaker. Like I think a lot of the things he has done have been borrowed among many different people, and you know, you can definitely look up to the things he does because he just does such a good job. And I think the one thing I'm going to say about these two films when I get into them is that they have the luxury of being in a time where film was still new. Yes, it's been around for years at the time, for decades. Even when film came out, the first film was literally like a train coming, you know, it was pretty much documentary. Let me rather say it was a lot of documentary, and then we moved on to things like Birth of a Nation. Is it Man on the Moon? Am I lying? Over the Moon? Am I lying? Moving image and writing things down and putting it, in motion, and camera development and sound development, because silent films were a thing, and then now it was like, oh, we're talking, and now we have to find people who can talk while acting on screen. You know what I mean? Like they got the luxury of living in a time where there wasn't too much to compare to, because the technology was still being developed to make film what it is today. Genres were becoming a new thing, like genres being developed under the belt, comedy, drama. Oh, but what about, westerns? Oh, spaghetti western. At this time, you know what I mean? You've got like film noir, for example. You had so many different things developing under this time. So I understand why these films are under 100%, but let's get into it. First, we're going to start with Rebecca, which is the first one I watched this week. Rebecca follows a story about a girl who was a helper in a way to some woman named Mrs. Van Hopper. And she meets Maxim, this really rich dude. He has a long ass name that I'm not going to repeat, but Maxim de Winter. He's like an influential dude. Back in the days when influencers just had to be everywhere and be in the newspaper, and you just had to be rich, and that's the only way you could be an influencer. Homegirl, she falls in love with this guy because he keeps going on drives with her. And eventually he pretty much professes to being in love with her and says that they should get married because she's about to leave to go to New York. And he wants, to kind of marry her so that he doesn't have to lose sight of her. Now the thing is, Maxim had lost his wife named Rebecca, and she was also very influential. Now this this new Mrs. De Winter has to live up to Rebecca's like legacy, because everyone loves someone who died. You know what I mean? They can do no wrong. She moves into this mansion, and she's got a bunch of helpers. One of the helpers is Miss Danvers, and she was obsessed with Rebecca. She was Rebecca's like right-hand woman kind of vibes, right? And throughout the film, because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, a lot of different events happen that lead to the new Mrs. De Winter's finding out that Maxim has killed Rebecca. This is in the blurb, so I'm not spoiling anything. The thing I like about this film is very simple. It's the fact that it was able to build up tension in a beautiful way. It literally goes up like this in such a nice way that I haven't felt that way for a lot of films in a long time. I think a lot of the things we like nowadays and the things that are made nowadays do this, like they build and then they do this like kind of thing where they want you to feel an array of emotions. The moment you think you figured something out, and these are good films, the moment you think you figured something out, there's another thing, and there's another thing, and there's another thing, right? But I think the dope thing about Alfred Hitchcock is the fact that he is very good at building and leaving you on a high note. I didn't expect to like Rebecca as much as I did, because I'm just like, oh, dude kills his wife, what could be happening? I was expecting that usual shock factor, but I forgot that this is the 1940s. Film is not the same anymore. So, when I watched it, I was so intrigued by everything. I was intrigued by the stories, the acting, the camera work. The camera work was really dope. They had such dope shots that I'm going to imitate. It has inspired me to go back into camera properly. The actors were really well done. I had to be aware that the times were different, so the way they speak to women and treat women is very different. But luckily it wasn't too bad. Yeah, he said annoying shit, but it was like tamer than what I expected. So at least it can sit well in this time. It at least didn't feel like, if I watch it in 2021, this shit must be cancelled. Do you know what I mean? Or like it's too problematic for me to enjoy anymore. Because there are a lot of films that do that now, especially shit that was made in like the 90s and early 2000s. That shit was wild. The story was airtight to me. I feel like I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed what everyone said. The acting was dope. Actually, acting and casting was dope. To be honest with you, Mrs. De Winter's, the new one, she was annoying as fuck, but it made sense. Like she's like, when you think of Elena from Vampire Diaries or Bella Swan from Twilight, but written well. What I'm trying to say is that like these whiny, annoying characters that still drive the story, and they're whiny and annoying for reasons. It's just because she is just a meek person. She cried so much crying. Like, stand up for yourself, try just a little bit. But she did a good job at it, because she irritated me to a point that it made sense. Her character made a lot of sense on why she was whiny. So I think she did a very good job, to a point where I want to watch her in another movie to see variety, if there was, I don't know. But I think it was cast well. I think Mrs. Danvers was cast really well. She scared the shit out of me, to be very honest with you. Every time I saw her on screen, I was just like, oh my god, woman. And Maxim, he was like the hot guy, I'm assuming. He looks like he's supposed to be hot. I can't tell. I know it sounds mean. I honestly can't tell. They're all there. They're not gonna know about this. I like that not everyone was hiding secrets from like this lady, you know what I mean? Some people were open with her and some people weren't, because it's not this thing of you must never tell, you must never tell, you must never tell, and then at the end you get this huge reveal, and it's like so much information, and it's like, why are you revealing all this information now when you've been hiding it from me? So instead you've got Maxim, who is very quiet about who Rebecca was, while other people are willing to give her information from their own points of view. One is just like, she was very beautiful and great, and the other one's like, she was a goddess to me. And then you've got Maxim, who won't tell the truth because he killed his wife, so you figure out what happened. You can imagine he doesn't really like her. I like that the surprises that came through were proper and airtight and didn't feel forced and annoying. I didn't want to like throw somebody, so that's great. And even with the fact that, and I know they did this a lot back in the days, they play music pretty much throughout the entire movie. Wall to wall music, guys. Wall to fucking wall. Like, it doesn't end. I kind of got used to it. At first it threw me off because I was like, when does the music end? But now I'm like, you know, it actually works really nicely because of the time. It gives me that old-timey feel. I feel like I'm teleported back in the time and the way they were thinking. We think of music very differently now and how it plays in films. And I can also imagine coming from like silent films to talking films, and silent films had wall-to-wall music, so I assume talking films would kind of imitate the same kind of thing until they learn that you don't need wall-to-wall music. The narrative can drive for you to a point where we have films like Mother that doesn't even have any music. So you know what I mean? Like, it's just a dope evolution of how everything worked. Can you tell I'm a nerd for film? In all honesty, I can't even find a fault in this movie, which stresses me out. Like, I think they rated it well. It makes sense why they gave it 100%. I honestly don't think I can find anything wrong with the film. On to the next one. So we've got 12 Angry Men. This is directed by Sidney Lumet or Lumet. I'm not too sure. I don't know his previous work, to be honest with you. So I'm not going to speak on it. I don't know. But look, I don't even need his previous work to tell you that this guy is great, okay? So 12 Angry Men is pretty much, it's a very simple, basic concept, but they did it so well. It looks at the life of 12 jurors who have to figure out if an 18-year-old man is going to be guilty for killing his father. Now, it seems like a very, close-shut case. Everyone assumes he's guilty except one of the 12 jurors, and they have to go and find out how to convince either him that he's wrong, or he has to convince the rest of them why he's right. It's a very simple, easy concept. The characters are called 1 to 12 because, I don't think it's supposed to know jurors' names or something. I don't know how it works in America. You've got your set of characters that are very, as much as, 11 of them are like, he's guilty, and the one's like, nah. Nobody's really set as much as you think they are on their way, right? So the juror who doesn't believe that the man is guilty, especially because he's 18, and he's like, I have to be very careful. I can't just say someone's guilty without discussing anything. I need to make sure that I'm sending someone to the chair because, execution was a thing. I need to make sure that I have all my facts right. And personally, I have doubts. And he goes and explains each and every doubt. Now, I can't say anything because I don't want to ruin the film. I really do feel that if you're a filmmaker, definitely go and watch this film. It's so good. It's so interesting to see like how human psychology played a role in why everyone made their decision and how it was easy to dissect it. Even though at the time, psychology was, kind of not completely looked up upon. The way we look at psychology now and respect it was not the same back in the 50s. So it was hard for them to prove that it's a real science, but it's very interesting how 12 Angry Men use psychology to play on these different ideas of who each man is. Each man has a different reason for why they believe in what they believe in. Only some of the characters actually even gave us a complete background. Not complete, but like a very in-depth background to who they are. Actually, the main juror, the one who said that he's not guilty, he didn't even say much. That's the nice thing. We don't really know much about his life, yet he was the most convincing person. I don't know what he does. We only find out his name is Davis at the end of the film. And it's so interesting how he gives away the least and makes everyone else reveal the most, but in a way that doesn't feel like he's like trying to probe. He's not even coming at anyone for a particular reason or that we know of. And I think it's the most interesting way of using a main character. Another thing that I thought was pretty cool was the fact that, if you're in a jury, you're not supposed to have your prejudices when you're ruling whether someone's guilty or not. So one of the characters, I'm not going to say completely what it is, has a prejudice against the man who's up for trial. And that is completely his whole reason for why he thinks the person is guilty. And everyone kind of walks away from this guy as he's going on and on about the prejudice he has against the man on trial. I think it was so interesting, especially because it's like late 50s, even though, you know, all these different problems existed with how people were, people didn't want to touch that shit. They like, one of the characters said, we need to put our prejudices aside if we're going to make a proper ruling. And I thought that was such an interesting like segment of the film and how they played it out. Just watch it, you'll see it. The camera angles were interesting. I mean, there was like, some of them was not strange, but it's like I wouldn't shoot someone like that just because of how uncomfortable it feels. But I'm also very aware of, again, the technology and how we understood camera angles and shots and stuff like that was different. We don't have as much knowledge as we do about the psychology of shots, you know, and stuff like that, right? Like, I think the nice thing is that they just played around and they said, ooh, this might look cool, this feels nice, you know, stuff like that. It was kind of like they are the people who helped us find out the guidelines to shots. There were some really cool, like, you know, movements that they had. I really liked how it was shot, like the movement of the camera, the way the camera reacted to each person. It was so interesting. The way it was cut was so interesting. Very straightforward, but interesting. It spoke in a way that I liked. You know what I mean? In a way I didn't know I liked, actually. Let me rather say it like that. I didn't notice how much I liked a simplistic edit, because it feels like everything is a lot nowadays. With reason, because I do watch a lot of, like, it's this type of stuff I'm watching, and I'm watching a lot of anime. You know how those cuts are. You know, the funny thing is, in this film they spoke about the weather so much, it was ridiculous. The whole time I was like, they keep going back to the weather, and I think it's interesting because what else do you talk about between talking about the trial to a bunch of strangers? You know, you can be the annoying guy, like there's a guy who works in advertising, keeps talking about his job like anyone gives a fuck. Or you could be silent, or you could talk about the weather. And if you're not talking about the weather, then you're talking about the trial, you know? So I think it was quite interesting. Oh, and the one guy was like, oh, I want to go to a baseball game. Each character gave away so little but enough that it helped, except there's a one character at the end. Everyone's angry about something different. Everyone's angry because this case is not ending. Everyone's angry because it's like, why are we discussing this a million times? Everyone's angry because we could have been gone if everyone just said this guy was guilty, but one had to say no. And was Rotten Tomato right? I think so. I honestly don't think I can necessarily see any flaws with the film. Everyone did what they needed to do, and it surprised me a lot. The story was airtight. The characters and the cast were like beautifully done, and I liked the you know, the mixture of different people that they had. I liked the way the characters were written. Everyone had their own voice and it made sense. We don't know these people's names because again, they're jury numbers, but it feels like each of them had a name and each of them had a story and a reason for what they were doing. No one was alike, but not too different either. It didn't feel like they wouldn't live in the same space. It didn't feel unbelievable. Also, the idea of toxic masculinity was so interesting in this story. Even though it wasn't straightforward, there were notions about the idea of toxic masculinity and how detrimental it is. Because one character says, I used to call my father sir, and now these kids nowadays don't care. Funny thing is, the kids nowadays are around our parents' age, so, you know, they felt the same way that they feel about us. So, you know, it's like these kids have no respect. And then, you know, he goes on to explain why that notion didn't end up having a good impact on his child. You know, I just love every little nuance, all the weird conversations they had between things, bathroom breaks, even waiting for people to start the jury. It felt like, you know, it didn't feel like everyone knows their line and everything is action and it's perfect. It felt like something you would watch, almost like a documentary of a real jury, but obviously more interesting without the nitty-gritty nonsense. They were able to make it feel like we're all walking around, waiting around. Okay, let's get started. I don't know what we should do. Maybe we should do this. You know, that kind of like, it's my favorite type of filmmaking when it doesn't feel too scripted, which is why I like shows like High Maintenance, for example, because as much as it is scripted, it doesn't feel like they always know what they're saying. Sometimes it's like they're saying awkward things, or it feels like it's impromptu or some shit. And I honestly enjoyed this film mostly because of that. So yes, Rotten Tomato is very right. And, you know, I'm not surprised that a lot of the 100%ers have been made before, I think, the 60s. And I honestly, it gave me a new appreciation for film and how far we've come. Just because we have a million stories out now doesn't mean we can't recycle and try do better. I definitely think that there's so many stories that we've left behind back in the days that we can definitely play around with now. Not everything has to be focused around a particular thing, you know what I mean? But yeah, let me know if you've watched any of these films. What do you guys think? And do you have any suggestions for the 90s, 80s, and the rest of the categories? Any film you're like, please watch this and tell me why they gave it such a low rating, or why does this have such a high ass rating? what the hell is this? Otherwise, I'll just be picking randomly myself. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. This was so much fun. I actually enjoyed it a lot. I can't wait to finish the series. I hope I get to do many of these. Because so far I have 10 planned out. 10 or is it 10? Yeah, technically I have 10 or 11 planned out. But I can do part 2s of it, so 100% part 2. I could do 100% TV shows, but that would take longer. But yeah, let me know what you're feeling. But for now, I'm sticking to films, and I'm going to stick to 2 or 3 films per category, just so that I have more content. Okay guys, have a beautiful one. Goodbye.